All right, here we go. I think we're good to go. Let me check, make sure everything's running. Yep, Facebook is going. Yes, Facebook is running. Excellent. And YouTube is going and Instagram is going. Fantastic. Well, hello, everybody. This is another episode of Tuesday Talks with Azren every Tuesday, 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So that is the time we use here in Calgary, Alberta, Calgary, Canada. If you're new to the segment, it's pretty straightforward. This is the segment, a weekly segment on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, where I answer some of your language learning questions. So the format every week is the same. If you're new to the segment, it's the same every single week. First of all, I'll give any quick life updates or updates with the Calgary Language Nerds, if there are any updates to share. Next, I will answer one question that was already predetermined. So we have a Facebook group, which is called the Language Learning Nerds. Many of you, probably half the people who watch this, are part of that Facebook group. So in that group, we put a poll, we put a survey every Monday, and people vote on what topic they'd like to see me talk about on the Tuesday Talks episode. So we're going to talk about those topics to start. And then after that, I'm going to go to the chat on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and I'll answer any other questions that people had while this was running live. A quick little personal update I wanted to share before we jump too far into the video. So I've been going through what's called vertigo, which basically is a fancy word for having dizzy spells, which is fascinating, it's basically where you get dizzy for absolutely no reason. And the dizziness can then lead to lack of energy, nausea, vomiting. I've been having that for I had it pretty bad for about 10 days. And then it's been considerably better for the past, I would say, few days, since Friday of last week. Turns out that the cause of this most likely was specific neck muscles that were quite tight, like specific neck muscles. And ever since I've been going to physio and doing some exercises they recommended, it's been helping quite a bit. So that's something that's going on in my personal life, and it's nice that it's getting better now. I was a little bit worried. I didn't know what the cause of it was. I couldn't quite figure it out. And so now I'm glad that slowly but surely it seems like we found what the problem is, and the exercises that the physiotherapist has given me, those exercises seem to be helping, which is nice. So there's a quick little personal life update. Now, let's talk about the topics that were voted in for today's episode. And there were two of them, actually. There were two that got almost the same number of votes. There were about 100 votes total, and I think it was 50 or so voted for one topic, and 40 or 45, something like that, voted for the other topic, or something like that. So they're really close. And they were tips for pronunciation, how to learn difficult sounds in your target language, and tips for public speaking, overcoming a fear of public speaking. And so let's talk about these two things. Now, on the pronunciation side, the number one thing that I would recommend is you have to understand that improving your pronunciation is a slow process. Pronunciation is one of the elements of language learning that, in my perspective, for many people, is the slowest process and the slowest thing and the hardest thing to improve. It's not the case for everybody. Like for myself, it's not the hardest part of learning a language, but for many that I come across, it definitely is one of the hardest parts of learning a language, and one of the things that takes the longest amounts of time. And the reason for it is that most skills in language learning are intellectual skills. They're intellectual. When you learn a new grammar point, you can study it. You can do practice exercises, and you can do some very mental things in order to really understand that grammar point. It's a brain-oriented skill. When you have to remember vocabulary, again, another brain-oriented skill. You're using your brain power to overcome some language learning challenges. The challenge and the problem, the reason why a lot of people struggle with pronunciation, is it's a very muscular skill. It's a brain skill, but it's also a muscular skill. You're remembering precisely what to do with your mouth, and you're training your mouth to accurately produce foreign sounds in a different language, which is really hard for certain people. Because if your tongue is 4 centimeters off and is 4 centimeters in the wrong place, suddenly you get the wrong sound and you're not able to pronounce the right sound. And it gives you an accent, or you're not able to pronounce it. And therein lies the challenge. Therein lies the challenge with pronunciation. And just like going to the gym and getting big muscles, or just like learning how to play a sport, it takes a lot of repetitions before you build your muscles and you build muscle memory. And pronunciation works the same way. It requires lots of time and repetitions before your tongue and your mouth and your brain, everything can work together and precisely, accurately do what needs to be done to produce the foreign sounds that you're trying to produce. I'll give you an example from my life. I'll give you an example from my life. By the way, I see you here in the YouTube chat. I'm not ignoring you. I just have different live streams going. So I switch between tabs. So no, I'm not ignoring you. So an example from my life, many examples from my life, it took me years before I could roll my R's and go rrrr. Years of practice, years of consistently trying to learn it and training my tongue to learn how to make that motion. I think most people don't view pronunciation as a process of years. I also find that, even Mandarin, I've always had good pronunciation. I look back at some of the there's some videos of me speaking in Mandarin when I was first learning, and my pronunciation was pretty darn good. Like, I've had good pronunciation from day one. But I'll be honest, my pronunciation has is way better today, 6 years later, than it was 6 years ago. And so with time of continuously working on pronunciation, I'm always working on it, always. With time, as I continuously work on my pronunciation, I continue to get better. And I think a lot of people don't continuously work on their pronunciation. They continuously work on their grammar. They continuously improve their vocabulary. They continuously try to learn expressions and work on their listening comprehension and their writing and this, that, and the other thing, but they do not continuously try to work upon their pronunciation. And I think that is one of the major problems and one of the major reasons why people don't improve with their pronunciation, is that they think it's a matter of learning the alphabet, learning the sounds, and then boom, you got it. Well, no, it's a constant process. You have to consistently try to learn and improve your pronunciation consistently. Now, the other thing with pronunciation that I think can help you is, this is more of a tactical thing. I think it can help you to understand what is happening in the mouth to pronounce difficult sounds. I think that can really help you. Think of it like if you're someone who's a musician, or you've ever done music in your life. When you study music, you study how to read music, and you also study how to produce the music. Does that make sense? So I used to play the trumpet. So when I would read music, I would read the note, and I would therefore know what to do with my fingers, right? When I played the note, what to do with my lips, what to do in order to create the note, the desired note based on my sheet music. And the reality is that while I could have learned the trumpet by ear, sure, that's possible. It's way easier if you know how to read music. And the language learning equivalent of that is if you understand how to read and understand what it means when you look at the International Phonetic Alphabet. What is the International Phonetic Alphabet? Well, the International Phonetic Alphabet is a system that phoneticians use, linguists use, to describe sounds. And if you understand even just the basics of reading some of the International Phonetic Alphabet, and you understand, even just not as an expert, but you have an idea of how it works, and you know some basic phonetics and some basics around the International Phonetic Alphabet, when you see a foreign word in a foreign language, a word that you don't know how to pronounce, you can look up the International Phonetic Alphabet spelling of the word, and you'll know precisely how to pronounce that word. The same way that if I were to hear someone play a note, by ear, it might be difficult to identify what note they're playing. Is it an A? Is it a B? Is it a C? Is it a D? Is it a F sharp? Is it a, what note is that? I don't know. If you have perfect pitch and you're in a language world, then sure, then you know, but most of us won't know, right? But if I have the sheet music and I can see the sheet music, I can see, oh, that's an F. Okay. Same concept. You hear a sound, you're like, ooh, I can try to copy it. I can try to reproduce it. I can try to do that, but you might not be successful. But if you could read the International Phonetic Alphabet and you can read exactly how phoneticians are precisely describing the sounds in that word, and you know how to read that, well, now you know exactly what to do to pronounce it correctly. So that is something that I think can help you a lot as well with pronunciation. It helps me quite a bit. I'm not a phonetics expert, but I know enough. I've taken some phonetics classes, linguistics classes, and I know enough to for it to help me. Okay. By the way, hello, Misha on YouTube. I see you. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for watching. Let me check out some chats on other places. Yes, I do see some other questions here. So questions I save for the end. I do see people's questions in the chat. I always save questions for the end, so I will answer your questions. I see a couple. Now let's talk about public speaking. Now this one is something that I'm not the biggest expert in. I think I have some advice to share and some insight to share, but I'm not a public speaking coach, nor am I a public speaker in terms of my profession. But I can give you some piece of advice based on just my own personal experience. When you're afraid of public speaking and it's something that's challenging for you because you're scared, you have to approach it the same way you would approach any phobia. Most phobias generally have very similar types of processes to overcome. Most of them. Now, there's lots of processes you could follow. I'm not an expert in all of the processes. So the biggest thing I would do is I would actually do some research on how do you overcome a phobia, because there's lots of techniques and strategies and research in the field. All of my experience just comes from, a couple of appointments I once had with a psychologist or maybe a psychiatrist, I can't remember, when I was a little bit younger. And we were talking about certain fears I had and some of the advice she gave me. So this is coming from that, to be honest. But one thing she talked to me about at the time was just exposure, right? Exposure to something and learning that the thing you're scared of is it's okay. It's not going to kill you. You're going to be okay. So if you're scared of public speaking, first of all, I want you to approach it as a project to overcome over X number of years, not something that you're going to do one thing and suddenly that's going to be the unlock. I think a lot of people are often looking for the one thing they can do, and within a 2-month, 3-month window, suddenly they're better. Well, that's typically not how it's going to work for a phobia. I think it's going to be something that takes longer. What I would do, I think one thing you have to do is you have to, based on my experience, when you have to overcome a fear, you have to do the thing that you fear. The only way to get over something that you fear is to start doing the thing that you fear more frequently and to do it a whole bunch of times until it becomes less and less scary. I think that's in my experience, that's something that really works. Now, if it's a crippling fear, it's extremely scary where you're going to faint on stage or something like that, you're going to have to build up to it. Maybe the first time when you're doing your public speaking, you're just going to do public speaking, with a very small group, right? Maybe you're just doing it to yourself in the mirror to start. Maybe that's your starting point. But the fact of the matter remains, for you to overcome a fear, you do have to face that fear. You do have to go do it various times, and you have to do it repetitively until it's not very scary anymore. Does that make sense? Like myself, I have and have had for my whole life a very big fear of needles. It's a common fear, I think. Extremely big fear of needles. I was so afraid of needles. I currently am still very afraid of needles. But growing up, I was so afraid of needles that I remember the first time I got a cavity in my tooth, one of my teeth. And the appointment to get it filled was a month or two later. And every day until the appointment, all I could think about was the needle that I was going to get, the freezing needle. That's all I could think about. I was like praying that they made a mistake. There was no cavity. They would even on the day of the filling, I asked them to check to make sure the cavity's still there. Like, I was terrified. Same with vaccinations as a kid. Terrified. Absolutely. I hated them. Super scared. And nowadays, I'm still very scared of needles. I still am. But I'm way better than I used to be. And now it's just a fear, and it's not really a phobia. And the reason is that I've gotten a bunch of needles over time, and I've gotten used to it. I've gone for, I've gotten plenty of needles. Not less than some people, but I've gone for blood tests. And I remember there's a period of time where I had a few needles in a very short period of time. And over time, you just kind of learn, your body learns that it's okay because you've done it so many times, and it becomes less and less scary each time. I think that can really help. Like for me, I've learned coping mechanisms as well. Like, for example, one thing I now do, and it's a very good thing, is when I've got a needle coming up, I used to think about it every day and obsess over it. Now I've learned that when I know the needle's coming up, it's specifically something changes in my mind, and I don't think about the needle until it's the day of the needle. So that means I only suffer on the day of the needle, versus before I suffered a month leading up to the needle. So it's a lot scarier for me. But when you compartmentalize it, I only suffer on the day of, which is one big coping mechanism for me. So I think going to psychologists can also help. Seeing someone and talking to someone about it, getting professional help, will really help you for phobias too, for fear of speaking in front of people. I think that can help as well. Okay, let's answer some questions. Let me flip through some of the chats here. Instagram, feel free to type any questions you have. Okay, here we go. So Rhonda asks, any comments on how to say letters which end up making sounds like you have a lisp or something? Letters like D, T, S, C with an S sound, or TH with D, D, T, S with an S sound, or th. Oh, if I understand, okay, so if I understand this question right, what you're asking is, how do you make sounds where you have a s or z or sh or zh? I think that's what you're asking, like letters where you have a consistent flow of air coming out of your mouth. I think that's what you're asking. Yeah, I hope that's the case. If I've gotten that wrong, Rhonda, just please type in the comments and let me know that I've got it wrong. But I think that's what you're asking. I do have, I think let's see. I think it depends on the sound. It's going to be different because there's lots of sounds where you have a consistent, you even have like lots of sounds where you have a consistent flow of air coming out of your mouth. I think the first thing I would say is understand the mechanics of what's happening. You have to have a consistent flow of air coming out of your mouth. That's important to realize. I think it's important to realize you've got two different types of sounds. You're going to have voiced and devoiced sounds. You'll have two types. So voiced is where your vocal cords vibrate. Devoiced is where your vocal cords do not vibrate. So, for example, something like when you do that, if you touch your vocal cords, your throat, if you touch your throat while you say your vocal cords don't vibrate. On the contrary, if you go your vocal cords do vibrate. Does that make sense? So I wonder, Rhonda, if perhaps there's one type of sound. Maybe you find devoiced sounds harder than voiced sounds. That's possible. So maybe like a z is harder than a s, or a sh is easier than a zh, because in zh, your vocal cords vibrate, but in sh, your vocal cords don't vibrate. Maybe that's what it is, Rhonda. I don't know. So I think that's probably two things I'd say initially. Think about, are you struggling more with the voiced sounds or the D voice sounds. And second of all, understand that you have to have a constant flow of air coming out of your mouth. Hopefully that helps. I don't see any follow-up from you here, Rhonda, so hopefully that helped you. Let me see other questions here. Hi, Nicole. Nice to see you. Nico on Instagram. Nice to see you. Let me see here. Other questions people have. Let me flip over to YouTube. Haven't looked at YouTube in a while. Gayatri has a question. Oh, Gayatri, we'll be talking soon. Nice to see you here. So Gayatri, one fear I had, speaking to someone who has only language in speaking to someone who has only language in common with me, and I'm still a learner of the language. My solution, declare early on that I'm not fluent to feel secure. I understand. Okay, so like you're speaking to someone, the only language you have in common is a language you're learning. So then Gayatri, you said you're learning Swedish. So it's like you're learning Swedish and the other person only speaks Swedish, or they don't speak English. They don't speak, I think you said you speak Telugu, I think you said. I think you speak Telugu or Tamil, yeah. So, yeah, that's definitely a common, Swedish, he's confirmed, Swedish. Yeah, that's a pretty common fear. That is a very common fear. I think the same thing applies here. The only way to get over that is to get practice speaking with people who only have one language in common with you, and to practice doing that, and to get used to it, understand that, and get used to the feeling of, oh yeah, there's awkwardness involved, and get used to the fact that it's going to be awkward. Right now you fear the awkwardness of them saying something you don't understand, you say something they don't understand, you get stuck. Like I feel that all the time, but I'm not scared. I still continue to feel it, but I'm not scared to feel it anymore. I sweat, my heart beats faster. I feel bad that I wish I was better. I feel like not good enough. I still feel all the same stuff I've always felt, but I used to be scared of it. I'm not so scared of it anymore. I kind of go and I'm like, oh, well, it's that thing again. I'm feeling that emotion again. Okay. And then I just kind of, that's it, right? I'm not scared of it anymore, so it doesn't bother me too much. I think you can take baby steps to work your way up to that. You might take some private classes with someone who speaks English or a language you speak, and they speak the target language, but you tell them not to speak to you in English ever. You make it a hard line in the sand in your classes, so you can kind of simulate the experience of talking to someone in the target language and simulate kind of that experience that you're scared of. That might help. Yeah, that might help you. Gayatri follows up. Is it okay to do that? Is to do the same with the new people? Yeah, I personally am okay with it now. It still scares me. I'm still scared of it. I don't like the feeling. I still makes me feel uncomfortable, but I'm not as nervous as I used to be. I used to be way more nervous than I am now because I've done it now. I've been in hundreds of situations where I'm talking to a brand new person, someone who only speaks the target language. They don't speak a language I speak. And I've done it so many times now that I'm just used to it. Just like my needles, like I'm still scared of it. I still don't like it, but I've done it so many times now that now when I go for the needle, I don't obsess so much that I barely can leave the house, right? I still don't like it. It's still scary. It's still uncomfortable, but I can do it. I think that's the thing that people can aim for, because I think often people think, I want the fear to go away. I want that feeling to go away. I think sometimes the feeling will go away. I used to be terrified in front of the camera. Now the camera is like my best friend. I mean, I have no fear in front of the camera anymore. So sometimes the fear can go away. But often, unless it's something you're doing every day, like I've been now making videos every day for 10 years almost, 8 years, 9 years, something like that. So eventually you just kind of get used to it. It doesn't not scare anymore, right? But if you're not going to do it every day, you're probably not going to completely get rid of the fear. If you do it every day for 10 years, yeah, the fear will go away completely. That's probably not realistic for people watching this. What is realistic is to do it as often as is realistic and practical, that you can do, And eventually you'll still feel that uncomfortableness inside you, but the intensity of that uncomfortableness will be less. And so it would be the equivalent of being a little bit scared versus very scared. And a little bit scared is something you can overcome. Very scared is something that is harder to overcome, right? I'm a little bit scared of needles, but I can go get a needle now. I don't like it. I'm still scared of it, but I can do it. Versus before, I'd barely even go get the needle. I'd barely even go get it. So, all right, I've got an appointment that starts in 20 minutes, and I have to leave my house in 10 minutes there to make it in time. So I'm going to let everybody go. Instagram, let's say goodbye to you first. See you. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Let's say goodbye to Facebook next. Goodbye, Facebook. See you. Oh, you know what? I'm going to answer one more quick question on Facebook because I just saw one come through. Sorry, one last thing I'll answer because I just saw it come through. How did you get used to different accents in your target languages? Is it just a matter of exposure to sounds? I'd really like to understand everything Australians say because I like the Aussie dialect, but it also is challenging for a non-English speaker. Yes, I agree. Especially Australian accent is quite challenging. Yes, so exposure, and then studying the differences. Expose yourself, and study the differences. So first, you have to listen to lots of Australian English, listen to lots of it to get your ears used to it. And second of all, search on YouTube, differences in Australian English compared to American English, differences in Australian English compared to British English. Whatever accent you're used to, Esteban, right, what you have to do is you have to go and figure out what are the key differences, what are you listening for? What helped me understand Chileans in Spanish, for example, was understanding what are the main differences between how Chileans speak and what I'm used to hearing. Because Chilenos speak a very different breed of Spanish, a very different type of Spanish. So that really helped me. And then the constant exposure. Those are the two things that'll help you. Okay, see you, Facebook. Bye-bye. And now it's a goodbye to YouTube. See you. See you next week.